Welcome to this presentation of the Rotary Club of North Bethesda, Maryland, USA. Our club was established in 1974. We meet every Friday morning at 7:45 a.m., and we often invite guest speakers to give presentations on all kinds of interesting subjects. Please contact us through our website at nbrotary.org. And thanks for watching. Our speaker today is Kent Mason, one of our club's charter members, who will be sharing some of his beautiful photography and his conservation work along the Eastern Continental Divide in West Virginia.
I have this month, February, and I'm going to focus on what's happening with around the world when it comes to climate and economics and our natural world. And this first one is on our natural world. Many of you have seen many of my pictures. Some of you haven't probably seen any of them. But I'm going to talk about West Virginia. That's, for those of you who don't know, I do all the photography for Nature Conservancy and West Virginia Land Trust and West Virginia, and have for the last approximately 20 years. After my career in the field of corrections, I retired to do photography and traveled around the country, and just ended up deciding that I wanted to do a photographic study of the Potomac Highlands, or the highlands of West Virginia, because it's a very unique area. This is Bear Rocks Preserve. It's it's in the highlands of West Virginia along the Allegheny front. On a clear day, you can look out and see 9 ridges. This picture here was one of the pictures used to send to the U.S. National Park Service to establish Bear Rocks Preserve as a national natural landmark, which is they identify places around the country that aren't necessarily owned by the U.S. government, but are very unique and are exemplary in terms of the natural whether it's a cave or whether it's something like this, a ridge, or an old growth forest. It's an exemplary example of that particular type of habitat or geological formation, or whatever it might be. Bear Rocks Preserve is a natural TNC site. It's the end of Dolly Sott's Wilderness. It is one of the prettiest locations, I think, on the East Coast. And one of the reasons for that is it stands around 3,000 feet above the land around it. The valleys are 3,000 feet below Bear Rocks Preserve, and it's a ridge that was created millions and millions of years ago. The Allegheny Mountains are the second oldest mountains in the world. The oldest ones are in China. These were created when everything was still quite fluid, and the African continent and the American continents collided and then separated. And when they collided, the African continent went over the American continent and created if you had a loose rug on a slick floor, and the loose rug, you hit it and it went into folds as you pushed it forward. That's kind of what happened to eastern United States and created the Appalachian Mountains. And the West Virginia Allegheny Mountains is the highest portion of the Appalachian Mountains. The Appalachian Mountain run from southern Georgia over to Norway and Sweden. that goes up through Canada underneath the ocean, and geologically, it's one of those old things that still's hanging around. Now it's made of seabed. If you look at the rock here closely, you'll see little white specks in there, and that's quartz. This is compacted seabed, and so the conglomerate wears quite rapidly compared to bauxite, which is created by volcanic action. So these mountains were at one time much larger, much higher than the Tetons, and they've just been worn down over the millions and millions of years. So you can see that some, as you're looking north on the left side, you're looking north up the Allegheny front, you can see how rounded it is. Much different and not nearly as dramatic as what you have out west. But the actual elevation gain between the valleys and the top of the mountains is about equal to what you have, for example, in the Tetons. This is an older picture. It's a 645 film picture, a large piece of film that I took back in the around 2000. So it's a little over 20 years old. And you notice how thinly developed the limbs are on the trees. That's from the constant wind from the west that comes up over this ridge. Most of the needles of these spruce trees are 18 inches or less off the ground. If you look at the base of the tree in the right center, you can see all that green. That is the limbs of that tree that's growing like a blanket on the ground out of the wind, or away from most of the wind, and that's where most of the greenery is. Now, if you look as we go through here, you can see some of these same trees. This is a more recent picture, and you see how much thicker the limbs are on the tree. They're growing in more directions now instead of being so well flagged as they were before. And that's a result of milder winters. This is Nature Conservancy. There's you can just barely see some wind turbines up here on Mount Storm, and that's about 5 miles away. Nature Conservancy owns up to about in here. They're trying to acquire all the land up to these wind turbines to protect this ridge, because this is quite unique habitat. It's like it's only 3 hours and 40 minutes from where we sit here in Montgomery County. And that's because the highways have gotten better in the last 20 years. When I first bought up there back in the 80s, it was over a 5-hour drive, and now it's 3 hours and 40 minutes. There's just some images of this preserve. These are red blueberry leaves, and this is one of the larger expanses of red blueberry leaves, and that every fall turn this bright red. It's one of the bigger expanses in the U.S.
Kent, did you say that all this land was underwater millions of years ago before it got before the the African continent ran into the North American continent?
No, it is one of the first landforms. I'll get to that later. And down in the New River Gorge area, there was a lake millions and millions of years ago that was much bigger than the Great Lakes we have today. That covered much of the area, but it wasn't ocean, it was a lake. This was all under ocean at one time, and then and then pushed up and then stayed up. And it's the second oldest mountains in the world, so they've been here for you know, they're one of the older landforms when everything was kind of mushy and moving around on the Earth's surface. So these are just different shots at different times of year, different light, to give you an idea what it looks like. Here's some of those same trees. They're getting a little thicker. This rock here, if you can see my pointer, can you see my pointer?
Yeah.
This rock, these three rocks here, I have stood on this rock here to take pictures numerous times. I came back one winter, a couple of winters ago, one summer, a couple of years ago, and the ice had formed on this and it hung over the side and got so much weight, it pulled all these three rocks off. So they're no longer there. Cannot get this picture anymore. So you can see how you've got, this is mountain laurel. This is wild azalea. Here's a small spruce tree. This is mountain ash. These are the kinds of, and of course, these are spruce, stunted spruce. And when the spruce get a really high, like this one here, they eventually get blown over. They never get to be maturity because there's just too much wind in this area. Because this is 4,200 feet. This is a winter shot of the preserve. I'll go through these a little quickly here so you can get an idea of what this preserve is like. It looks, it's a tabletop land. It's fairly flat on top. But here's the Allegheny front. Some of the places are like this where it's a 50, 60 foot drop off, and some of it's just rounded and doesn't have much of a ridge edge at all. This is mountain laurel, this flower here. This area just gets loaded with flower. This is my grandson and the daughter of a conservationist. This kid here is now 6'4.5".
Hmm.
So if you go in from the Allegheny front about a half mile, you start getting into spruce forest that were planted by the Forest Service back in the 30s. And this is a bog. There's a lot of natural bogs up there. Bogs are shallow lakes that are created because it's like a bowl, and the bedrock holds the water from going down through, and so it's like a bowl of water, but it's very large scale, hundreds of acres, and organic material gets into the lake or to this bowl of shallow water, and vegetation eventually starts growing on top of it. And this is a cranberry bog. Cranberries are out here, and this is cotton grass. And then on the edges of it, you have the heath, which is the blueberries here, and then you get up into the spruce trees. The bogs, you'll get spruce trees starting to grow in the middle of the bog, but they eventually will fall over because they get top heavy, and the bog can't support it. So this is the headwaters of Red Creek, which turns into a pretty good river downstream. It's always called a creek. It doesn't, but it looks like a river when it has a lot of water. And then beyond that, you get into a grassy bald. So, and you can see the wind, how all the trees are growing at an angle. It's so windy up there. And buffalo used to roam up here, mountain buffalo. Most people don't realize that buffalo were in the mountains, and they were hunted out in the late 1890s. All the buffalo and elk were hunted out of West Virginia. as were the mountain lions. Here's some winter shots. You can see the streaks of snow. This is an old film shot. And this is a fall. You get your first snows up there, typically in late September or October. The winters have gotten a lot milder, and the road is open most of the time now. They have it gated off because they don't want people getting up there and getting stuck. But 50 years ago, once it got snowed in, you could never get back on that road again. It would drift up, and there'd be drifts, 10 to 20 feet high, and the road was closed. So now we're going to go down to Dolly Sod's Wilderness. So here's Bear Rocks here, and Dolly Sod's Wilderness is south of it, and it goes for about 12 miles south along this Allegheny front. Very similar type of land. You're going down the ridges. You can see the fog in the valley. That's pretty common, that you're on top of the mountain and you got the fog in the valley. Very rugged land. Now, it's been this way when they did the survey, the Fairfax line. The Fairfax line was done in the 1650s. I can't remember the exact date, but it was done by the father of George Washington and a couple of other people that are well known. At any rate, Lord Fairfax of Baltimore was given all the land up to the headwaters of the Potomac River by the King of England. And so they did the Fairfax line, and when they came over this ridge, which was very hard for them to do because, I mean, this was all wilderness back then, they got on top of here and it was open just like this. There is no way of knowing how long that this has been this way, but ever since the white man came to this country, it's been open. Like they describe this opening being this windswept ridge being covered with heather like this for anywhere from a quarter to a half a mile. So it's been this way for as long as we know. This is a weather front going across the ridge. And this is looking down on North Fork Mountain, which is on the east side. Now, as the weather comes from the west into Dolly Sods and over this ridge, it's rising. It's coming out from winds that are coming from across the Great Lakes over the Ohio Valley, and as it rises and gets up to 4,000 feet, it starts dropping a lot of water because it cools as it rises. So where I live in West Virginia, right at the base of the Allegheny front, we get about 60 inches a year of rain. And then on the other side of it, you have what's called a rain shadow. And this mountain over here, North Fork Mountain, has plants on it that you find in the desert of out west, prickly pear cactus, because it's so dry. They get on this side anywhere from 13 to about 30 inches of rain a year. And you get down around 15 to 20 inches. You're at desert levels.
So, Kent, what kind of rocks are these? A type of rocks? Because it looks like calcite.
No, it's a conglomerate. It's a sand, compact type of sand with quartz in it. This is Seneca Rocks, which was used in World War II to train people to climb rocks for planning for D-Day. This is a wood lily, something that is you find frequently up there. This is, again, some more of the Allegheny front. This is right along the front again. The kind of plant life you have there, the heather. This is an azalea, and that they have just a wonderful expanse of azaleas in the spring. There's a lot of rock streams left over from the Ice Age and from the burning. A lot of this area, not the area right near the front, but beyond that, out in this area here, we're about a mile away from the front here. This was at once all spruce forest like this, old growth spruce forest and virgin timber, and it was industrially stripped completely. And between the 1890s and 1920, created a serious problem. This originally, you would have never gotten this shot because it would have been solid spruce forest. This is Mount Crayon, one of the biggest mountains in West Virginia. It's the 5th tallest mountain in West Virginia. I live in the base in the Red Creek Valley, at the base of this mountain, right up against the wilderness. That's where I live 6 months a year. It's about 10 miles away.
What time of the year was that picture taken? Can you recall?
That was probably late summer. This is one of the larger bogs up there. Sunlight coming across first thing in the morning, in a bog that's full of this grass, special grass that's only cottontail grass that only grows at high elevation. One of the rock formations, you got many of these formations around. In these bogs, you have this plant here that has little sticky stuff all over it. The bogs don't have a lot of nutrients in it. They're nutrient poor. So you get a lot of mosses in there, and these plants here eat insects. So the insect lands on it and they get caught in all these sticky stuff, and then it collapses on them and eats them. And this is what in these bogs, this is the cranberries that you have. I don't go up there to harvest them. They're small cranberries. They aren't like the ones that are we grow. This is a Jensen bottle plant, and the bees go in through here, and it's like a bottle. They have to open up this and get inside to get to the nectar, and they do it. You go up to one of these plants and all of a sudden hit it, and all of a sudden you'll have a bumblebee come out of it. A lot of black bear. There's about 800 black bear that are killed each year in this area. It's an area that's hunted a lot by locals for bear. This is Ashton Bernine, a guy that he and I took a 3-day hike back into the wilderness, and this is walking through one of the spruce forests, one of my favorite places. You can see all the mosses along here. This is reindeer moss that you will find in Alaska or Canada. It only grows at high elevations. And a lot of the plant life, you got horseshoe hare up here. You have things that are left over from the last ice age. This is a boreal climate. It's much colder than what you normally have in the mid-Atlantic region. So you can go to this area and go have environments that you would have to go to Maine or Alaska or Canada to find. It's just a very unique area. One of the plants from up there, just some shots on Mount Crayon, one of the streams.
And how many people live there?
Excuse
like
me?
you? How many people live there like you do at least half the year?
Up where I live, about maybe a quarter of the people. This is a blue crayfish, only found up there in these mountains. This is a cheap mountain salamander, an endangered species. This is a female with its eggs. Very rare to find a cheap mountain salamander, much less to find one with its eggs.
Did you say cheap?
Cheat
Cheat.
mountain salamander. I'm doing a book now for a guy who's a wealthy conservationist, and he's bought up around 8,000 acres along the Allegheny front, trying to protect the connectiveness. He owns the northern end of Spruce Knob, which is the highest mountain in West Virginia. Most of this area is owned by the Forest Service, and he's trying to connect the Forest Service property and the Spruce Recreation Area with Dolly Sod's Wilderness. So he's bought up the north end of this mountain and the south end of Mount Port Crayon, and he's done a pretty good job of doing it.
So Kent, what percentage of the land in West Virginia is owned by the federal government versus the private owners?
I can't tell you, but it's not. It's a very large forest, but compared to the state, what's available, it's not that great. Less than 1% of the land is in wilderness that's protected and has the wilderness protection. Although it has a lot of wilderness compared to, let's say, Maryland, that has none.
Because I think the number of years back, J. Rockefeller, who was a senator from there, and everybody was saying, at least in general public, saying everything is owned by a Rockefeller family in West Virginia.
No, not at all. It's broken up. This is a sundown from Mount Port Crayon. It has one of the, because it's a high elevation, very few people living up in this high country. It's one of the darkest areas in the east. Very good for stargazing and that sort of thing. The night skies at my home, when we look out our window, we're looking at this pretty regularly. It's just amazing. So here's some winter shots up there in the wilderness. This is horror frost. This is it looks like the sun is out here, but the temperature was around zero with wind. And what happened is the day before this, there was fog and it was real cold. And as the fog hits the twigs and limbs, it creates a frosty crust all over it. And it can build up to where it will grow as far as 6 inches out from the limbs.
Kent, have you been to Green Bank?
Yes, I visited there, but it's not a place that I go regularly. But here's example of the scalping of the snow from the wind coming across the ridge. Very windy areas. This is an image I got this summer of a fawn on our property. It's probably just a couple of days old. You can see the beginnings of fern here. So this was late May, early June, somewhere in there. The fawns usually are born in late May or early June. The first week of June is about as late as they go. This is Seneca Rock, the one that they used during World War II. If you could see a person on here, they'd be a speck. It's a very large rock outcropping. This is Canaan Valley. Canaan Valley is the highest the largest and highest wetland valley east of the Rocky Mountains. It's 5 miles long and 2 to 3 miles wide. It's mountains on each side of it. I'm on Cabin Mountain here looking down into the Canaan Valley. Canaan Valley is a ski destination. 20 years ago, they were averaging 160 inches of snow a year. That has changed dramatically. I don't know what it has been the last 5 years, but it hasn't been anywhere near that.
And the skiing there was very good.
Yeah, this is a great cross-country skiing area. So this is Raven Rocks looking across down into the valley. And West Virginia does have some very nice lodges. They have a nice lodge down here at Canaan Valley State Park. It's a very economical place to go visit. And these are some images in the valley. This is the Blackwater River that starts up there in the valley. And this is kind of towards the upper end of it. And this is down as it goes through one of the 500th wildlife refuge in the U.S. is the Canaan Valley National Wildlife Refuge. There was a big a legal battle. A power company wanted to flood the valley and use it for power, and the environmentalists ended up winning that particular battle. Here's a rare orchid. These are rare flowers that are found in the valley.
And may I ask you a philosophical question? Does it bother you how much beauty is wasted?
In relative to what?
Well, you're giving us these beautiful pictures, and so we are enjoying the beauty of this while you are showing it to us. So my question is, does it bother you how much beauty goes to waste because there's nobody there to appreciate it?
Oh, well, it has a lot of visitors. There's a lot of people that tourism is going to be West Virginia's main product. And it's becoming more and more. My hope is that it doesn't get overrun with people. This is a fawn. This is the first time the fawn stood up. I watched this doe lick something on the ground, and I got out my big telephoto lens. This is equivalent to 22 power. So I'm about 40 yards away, and this is the first time the fawn stood up after being born. So it's less than an hour old.
Kent, do you know the derivation of the word or the name Dolly Sods? I've been up there to visit, but I never did.
Okay, the Germans, the Germans occupied the valley right at the base of the Allegheny front, on the east side of the Allegheny front, and the Dahl family, that was spelled D-A-H-L, were Germans that settled in that area, and they had sheep, and they ran sheep up the ridge to the top of where all this heather was and these balds were, and they would burn it to get more grasses, and they would run their sheep up there every summer and then bring them down in the winter, and they did this for I don't know how many years, hundreds, at least 100 years. And it became the Dahl family Sods. And it was later anglicized to Dolly Sods. So that's the history of it. And this is a beaver lodge and dam here in the middle of Canaan Valley. And you can look at all these, let's see. Go in here, you can see how it's full of mosses and how wet it is. If you walk across that moss, your foot would go down at least a half foot. As I was walking across here, this is an area that's protected and for research. I was out there doing documentary photography with one of the scientists. And as walking through this, I hit a soft spot and I went all the way down to my crotch.
Hmm.
I can't tell you how hard it is when your foot is all the way down to your crotch, trying to get out of a bog. It is tough work. But it's not a place that you can walk through very easily. Here's some more pictures of Canaan Valley. I'll go through it real quick. Canaan Valley did have some cattle grazing in there, and this is part of the wildlife refuge. This is balsam fir. It's the lowest area in the United States that balsam fir grows. It's basically a northern boreal climate tree, and these are hummocks, moss hummocks growing around the base of the balsam fir in Canaan Valley Wildlife Refuge.
Hmm.
So
That is pretty, very pretty.
I watched this kingbird. It's one of the flycatchers feeding its young. I watched him feed this guy, and it took him 15, 20 minutes to eat that. He was having a really tough time. But they had just fledged. Hummingbirds are very common up there. This is a female hummingbird. You've probably never seen this, but they have white tips on their tail. Another bog, and that's the cotton grass. All these little pieces here. This cotton grass has gotten a little wet, but that's what it's after. When it first comes out, it looks more like a cotton ball, but after a few rains, it starts looking like this. But that's the seed head to the cotton grass. And then you have toads and toadstools. A lot of fog down in this area. It's the boreal climates tend to have a lot of fog. So this is the same area, different composition, different lens, but with and without fog. And look at the diversity here. Here you have spruce trees and balsam fir and some, this is shrubbery down in here that the deer feed on. And then you go up and here you're into aspen. And then eventually you get up here and you're into solid hardwoods in the high ground. So it's a very diverse area. Some winter pictures up there. Big time ski area. Cross-country skiing is very popular. They have 2 downhill ski resorts, but cross-country skiing is as popular as the downhill. And now we're going to Blackwater Canyon. How am I doing on time? I'm running out of time, aren't I?
Yeah, you're
Blackwater
over.
Canyon is very close to these 2 areas, and it's about 1,000 foot deep. And I'll just run through the pictures very quickly so you can get an idea of what Blackwater Canyon is like. Kayaking's a big deal up there. West Virginia is a place to go for outdoor sports and recreation. Mountain biking is a big deal up there. Lots of cross-country bike trails up there. Hiking, camping, fishing, hunting. Bobcats you typically don't see because they're nocturnal. This is Otter Creek Wilderness that's within 30 minutes of these other locations, which is another large wilderness. I'm going to roll, and this is one of the gorges. I'm just going to finish up here real quick with these 2 gorges. This is Cheat Canyon at low water, and that's what it looks like at low water in summer, as low as it goes. But here is a more typical flow, and this is an area that has been protected by Nature Conservancy and a number of other conservation organizations. So I did a trip down the river in a raft when this is medium flow, this isn't high flow. And I got a couple of, another group to come with us so I could get pictures of them. I was let out upstream and then got these guys coming down the river. And this is the boat I was in. I was in the front of this boat, and it went up like this one time and came down and hit a rock, right on top of a rock. And I was sitting on the front, and it catapulted me out, and I went in the drink, including my camera. My camera kept on working, and I was able to finish the trip and continue to get pictures.
Beautiful.
Now, this is the new River Gorge. This is going to be the newest national park just created last week. It's the second oldest river in the world. It runs north instead of south. It was created when in one of the ice ages, not the last one, but a couple of ice ages before that, pushed all this big amount of ice, rubble down and created a huge dam. And I'm talking about huge. I'm talking about something that was a couple 100 miles wide. And it created a huge lake in the middle of what is now West Virginia, Ohio, Indiana, Michigan. And eventually the wall that was created from all this rubble was it filled up and it overflowed, and it created 3 new rivers. One of those new rivers is the Ohio River and the Mississippi River, and they all run south. Well, a portion of this river still exists, and that's the new River Gorge, and that's what's been made into a national park. So here's a few images of the new River Gorge, and this is going to end my discussion, my presentation.
Great.
E-
Fascinating.
Yeah, thank you all for it.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Ken.
And it,
Ken,
they do a lot of rafting there. It's by making it a national park, it's going to attract a lot more people. So the coal industry has been dying in West Virginia since the 1950s. It's been 70 years that the coal production has been going down, and they realize they've got to reinvent themselves. And tourism is going to be the natural wonders of West Virginia is going to be their big draw.
So Kent, our question has to do with besides the coal industry you just said, are there any kind of semi-precious stones or precious stones or any other natural resources besides the coal?
Oh, there's a lot of different types of mining there, but there aren't any precious stones. No, there's no mining for precious stones there.
And did somebody see Bigfoot here?
I have no idea. I don't think so.
Okay.
Only Kent. Only Kent.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Wonderful. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Fantastic, Kent.
Fantastic. Absolutely beautiful.
Wonderful way to start the day.
It's an easy place to go to visit, and it's a 3-hour drive, 3.5-hour drive. Or you can go to Canaan Valley and get a room there for about $120 a night, and very, very quite nice. It's actually a new building that they just renovated the old place, rebuilt the old place. It's really quite nice, and you can tour the area. Here's the prickly pear cactus I was talking about that grows on the top of one of these mountains. Another Nature Conservancy site on top of North Fork Mountain that runs about 35 miles. Here's Tabletop Pine, a very unusual habitat on top of that mountain. I'm keeping on going on. I should stop, should I not?
Yeah. Well, it's up to people. You know, I don't know if people need to leave or what. So if you need, you know, don't feel shy about it if you've got to go. So, because we are certainly beyond the hour.
Okay. I'll continue through the pictures, and I'm already almost done. This is a new cliff canyon. It's really a gorgeous place. This guy I'm doing a book for, he bought the canyon, 5 miles of this canyon, and then he turned around and sold the development rights to the entire canyon to Nature Conservancy and West Virginia Land Trust. And so this is preserved forever now. It has some of the oldest trees in white cedar trees in West Virginia in this canyon. That's a water snake with a fish that I saw there. This is what an old growth spruce forest looks like. And this is what West Virginia, if you had gone there 150 years ago and gone into the wilderness, this is what you would have seen. These trees are huge. They're a couple 100 feet high, just huge.
We had camped with our 5 kids in the Blackwater area 50 years ago. It was a fabulous trip.
Yeah. This is old growth hemlock forest here. And then they have caves. This is a cave on Nature Conservancy site. Another on one of the Nature Conservancy site. You can see the size of these caves just by seeing the people down there. You can get an idea of how large some of these rooms are. This cave here runs 2 miles through the center of a mountain, through the center of a ridge. The stream goes through the center, literally through a center of a ridge. It's kind of amazing to see this. And if you were a tower looking up into the Blackwater Canyon, this is what you'd see. You can see it's really rugged once you get down into it, but when you get up on top, it just isn't the very dynamic kind of peaked mountains that you find out west. The mountains that we have out west are really pretty young compared to these mountains here in the east. No, that's it, folks.
Is this
great,
the top
great, thank you.
Is this the top of the trees?
Yeah, I'm in a tower.
It's not bushes, it's trees.
Yeah, these are trees. I'm in a tower about 200 feet up, taking this shot across the landscape. I'm looking into Blackwater Canyon.
Just beautiful. Thank you, Ken. This was a real treat.
Yeah, I feel like I took a trip there. It's lovely.
Yeah.